The roar of flames echoed across the valley with intensity. He could hear the pads of his feet sprinting across the trodden paths with frantic speed. An ominous, smoky haze clouded his vision, preventing him from making out anything more than the blur of rushing figures in the distance. The howls of pain, the whimper of frightened pups, and the smell of burning pelts was all he could clearly grasp. And a sharp, painful howl cried out over the chaos. His eyes shot open, deep blue piercing the veil of darkness around him. His breathing was uneven, and it took him several minutes to gain his composure. He got on all fours, quietly creeping past a small white wolf snuggled up at his right to the mouth of the cave ahead. Moonlight pulled over the forest. It illuminated his snowy pelt, whilst the black markings that masked his eyes were shrouded in shadow. He sat alone, eyes fixated on the distant land, though he focused on nothing in particular as thoughts consumed him.
Illicit, is everything okay?
The soft, tired voice caught his attention, and he turned to see the wolf he had tried not to waken. Her icy stare was fixed on him, the worry clear in her expression.
I'm fine, love. Go back to sleep.
Lovelorn had grown used to this nickname, as more than just her siblings had addressed her in this way. It never bothered her, but rather she found it somewhat endearing. Illicit returned his attention to the land laid out before him. Lovelorn approached, sitting a mere foot away, the tip of her tail resting just beside his.
Did you have that dream again?
Yeah.
There was silence that followed. This was not new to either of them. Lovelorn had often witnessed Illicit wandering out in the middle of the night, and more often than that had she awoken him from a restless slumber.
You know, I've thought about this for a while now. Maybe we should try tracking down that place.
You can't be serious!
Illicit's voice resonated with something similar to anger. However, Lovelorn knew the fear that hid beneath these sharp tones.
Maybe it would bring you closure. Tracking down your past, finding out what happened. Doesn't it bother you not to know?
No, as a matter of fact, it doesn't.
His hard words masked any trace of concern or curiosity he may have had. A sigh escaped her lips.
I'm not going to tell you what to do, but I've had to watch this since we were pups. If you haven't been able to move past this now, I'm worried it'll be stuck with you forever.
Why do you still feel the need to worry about me? I'm not a pup anymore.
Of course I worry about you. I just want to help.
I don't need help. I'm fine.
Illicit, it's me you're talking to. You don't have to hide anything from me.
She placed her great-tipped paw atop his own, attempting to comfort him. He quickly retracted his own, however, standing up and turning his head away from her painted stare.
Let's just go back to sleep.
He headed back towards the cave, leaving a saddened Lovelorn to contemplate his situation alone. The next morning, the sun washed over a near and desolate cave. The only two that remained had been Illicit and Lovelorn. He chose to sleep in every morning, despite the grief given to him from the rest of the pack. Though it had been difficult, sleep eventually found him, and warmth at his side coaxed him into sleeping all the more deeply. Meanwhile, others were up at dawn, working and performing routine tasks around their territory.
Gallant.
The deep worry tone of their alpha, Elias, sounded over the others. His stance was sturdy and prideful. The white of his fur was slightly lackluster with age, though it did little to diminish the look of his power and wisdom. But at this very moment, he was obviously flustered.
Yes, father?
Gallant hadn't been as tall as his father, though his coat was as white as his siblings. He held the same gray markings as his sister Lovelorn, and if not for their obvious difference in build, it would be difficult to tell them apart.
Wake your siblings.
Is everything all right?
There's going to be a pack meeting.
Gallant nodded in approval before trotting back up the hill toward the cave. Though he was less than enthused about his waking duties, his father's words weighed heavily on his mind. Once inside, he gently nuzzled his sister, softly waking her from slumber.
Gallant?
It's time to wake up. Father has something to address.
What?
Any remaining sleep had quickly dispersed as Lovelorn looked at her brother worriedly.
Is everything okay?
I don't know, but we better get going.
He turned his attention to the sleeping illicit, his eyes much harsher than before.
You! Wake up!
He yelled to the other, the courtesy he had given the twin now completely diminished. A small snarl escaped Illicit's black muzzle, though he had not even bothered to open his eyes.
Go away, Gallant.
I'm not telling you again! Up!
He pushed the other with his paw, Illicit's eyes darting open with threatening anger. Another sharp snarl escaped him, and his teeth bared as he spat his words.
What, Gallant? What do you want?
Hold your tongue. I won't tolerate your attitude this early in the morning.
Well, you know what? If you didn't want me to bark at you, maybe you shouldn't have woken me up.
Lovelorn quickly interjected, standing on her feet and placing herself between the two males.
Guys, come on. Father needs us, right? We shouldn't waste time arguing. We can rest after, Illicit.
Lovelorn was attempting to calm Illicit's morning anger, which proved half successful when he finally grumbled.
Fine, but if anybody wakes me up after this is over, I can't be held responsible for my actions.
He stretched his legs, watching as Gallant snorted disapprovingly before setting out ahead of them. When Illicit rose, he shook the few specks of dirt that clung to his pelt, soiling its purity. A large yawn escaped his black muzzle, and he shook the remaining dreariness that tempted to coax him back to sleep.
Here they come.
When the siblings finally arrived, the rest of the pack members had already gathered near the base of the cave. All eyes seemed to gravitate towards them as they approached, and did not cease until they were seated near their youngest brother, Bandit.
Now, for the reason you're all here.
Elias began, any trace of his worry now lost to his conviction.
The Ravens have recently begun their chatter of the war. Of this, I'm sure you have all heard. I've spoken to the Alpha of the neighboring pack, and it saddens me to say that these are more than just idle rumors.
An eerie silence fell over the pack, all looking to one another with panicked eyes. Pumps whimpered beneath their mother's trembling legs, sensing their fearfulness. Even the siblings seemed concerned of the sudden news, exchanging glances towards one another.
Have the neighboring packs decided on a stance on this war, Father?
Gallant was the first to break the silence, the strength of his voice providing mild comfort to the rest.
It seems as though they are divided. Some of them have chosen to align themselves with this force, others wanting to stand against its reign of terror, and others still seek only to keep their own affairs.
Is it time for us to make a decision as well?
Exactly. I'm sure you will all agree that giving up our homeland is not an option. Even if we were to tuck tail and leave, the enemy is ever growing. You know that my intention has always been for the betterment of the pack.
A silence followed, the Alpha's posture now straighter and more confident than before.
But I have known my stance on this war for some time now. Despite the risks, I feel that Lazarus' tyranny has to end. As long as I am the Alpha, we will stand to fight his threats.
There seemed to have been mixed reactions from those that sat huddled around them. Though the pack had always trusted their leader, something about the decision made their hair stand on end. Mild chatter echoed lightly amongst them, and the siblings looked to them with surprise.
I heard Lazarus is completely insane. He fears not the Allied forces, nor even the possibility of death.
Bandit spoke, the cowardice easily read by his tone and curled position. His emerald hues illuminated with both fear and growing hesitation, while the blackened tips of his fur stood on end.
Those are the words of a coward who would bend before tyranny as a slave.
Illicit snapped, Bandit lowering his head at the sudden aggression. Elias cleared his throat, signaling for the rest to silence themselves.
I am not forcing anyone to stand with me. I understand the risks, and so should you. This is not a normal territory dispute. This is full-on war. Whoever wishes to leave is more than welcome to. But for those who choose to stay, we will fight for the land that belongs to us. If there is any part of you that knows what is just, any part that believes in what we are capable of, then I ask that you stand with me.
A quiet now settled among them. The Alpha's words echoed in both the minds and the hearts of the others. Many had felt a wave of guilt for their moment of hesitation after hearing their leader's powerful words. The first to speak among them had been Gallant.
Father, I will, of course, follow you into battle.
Is there no way to resolve the issue without war?
My sweet child, if there were an option, I would have already set to work on it. But unfortunately, this enemy does not listen to anything other than surrender.
Lovelorn's expression dropped, the answer more than just disheartening.
What of those with pups, Alpha?
A white wolf with brown markings spoke, her hazel optics as fierce as crashing waves.
Of course, those with pups will be escorted to a safe location. You should think better of me, Halaki.
Of course. My apologies.
Her head dipped with sincerity, and she withdrew back into the masses.
Do we have any allies on our side?
Yes, Gallant. Though it is unfortunate that the nearest clan willing to help is at least a day's walk away.
So the ones nearest to us have decided to scurry off like vermin, huh? Can't say I'm surprised in the least. Cowardice seems to be spreading worse than the rumors.
Illicit spat with contempt, his eyes now narrowed.
You should not speak ill of our fellow wolves, Illicit. They are simply trying to do what they feel is best for their pack. That does not mean their choice is wrong.
How can you, of all wolves, stand before your pack with even an ounce of pride and say that it isn't wrong to leave your own territory to be taken over by a power-hungry mutt? I mean, it comes as no surprise that Bandit would support desertion because he doesn't have a courageous bone in his body. But I always thought better of you.
His words were deeper, harsher, and made Gallant immediately snap at him in response.
Don't you dare step out of line with our Alpha! You know better!
What are you gonna do about it? Don't snap at me just because you go along with everything he says.
If you have a problem following orders, then maybe you should scamper off on your own. No one would miss you.
Lovelorn looked nervously between the two of them, rising on all fours to act as a barrier.
Please don't say that, Gallant. You don't really mean that.
It's no surprise you would stick up on his behalf. How does it feel, Illicit, to have our younger sister constantly find the need to defend you?
You shut your mouth! You are about a sentence away from dying where you stand!
The snarls that now erupted between them had become vicious and beckoned the others to engage in confrontation. It was enough to cause the pack unease, though none of them attempted to break up their quarrels.
Guys, please don't fight like this. Can we just get along?
Bandit spoke apprehensively, his posture an indication of his lack of confidence.
Stay out of it, Bandit!
Bandit's ears fell back to the base of his cranium, faltering beneath Illicit's strength and intensity.
You two, go to the den. Now!
Elias interjected, his voice stern as he looked between his two oldest sons.
But I...
Before Gallant could finish his statement, Elias growled in return.
Now!
Gallant immediately hobbled off towards the den. Illicit hesitated, as though he were debating disobeying orders. But after one sharp look from his father, he got up, lightly growling beneath his breath as he followed suit. As they awaited what was sure to be a disapproving lecture, they sat on opposite sides of the den, neither one choosing to look at the other. Instead, they sat facing the wall, minds still stirring with anger and an insatiable need to vent their contained frustration. This went on for several minutes until the deep, padded steps of their father could be heard at the entry.
Illicit, Gallant.
At his words, both wolves slowly approached, almost as though they were pups in for punishment.
How long do you two plan on acting this way? Has it not already gone on long enough? This behavior is simply unacceptable.
But Father, it was Illicit who chose to speak out in such a way. I was only putting him in his place.
Oh, yeah. Just keep kissing Dad's tail, Gallant. Maybe then he'll let you play Alpha for a day.
Enough!
Elias let out a frustrated sigh, attempting to regain the composure he had lost.
It's already bad enough. You don't get along at home, now you want to publicly display your own plight. You're lucky your mother wasn't around to see such a shameful display.
Both males were silent, and Elias continued, controlling his vexation.
Look, it's time for both of you to grow up. We are on the brink of war, and you two want to start tearing us apart before the enemy can even reach us? If you don't get it together, our pack's strength and trust will suffer for it. Do you understand?
I understand.
When Illicit did not comply as easily, Elias continued.
I have tried to let you two work out your own issues, but it's gotten out of hand. With your mother being injured and the news of war spreading over the region like wildfire, I no longer have the time nor the patience to wait for you to patch such petty quarrels.
I apologize for my actions, Father. It won't happen again. I will go and reflect on my actions.
Gallant dipped his head respectfully before Elias motioned for him to leave. He had always been the more rational of the two, and Elias was confident that he would take his words to heart. Illicit, however, would not be as fortunate as to leave alongside his brother.
And what of you, Illicit?
If you're asking me to be all chummy with him, that's not gonna happen. But as long as he keeps his damn mouth shut, there shouldn't be any problems.
When are you going to stop all these outbursts? You think immediate retaliation is the way to handle conflict? When are you going to grow up?
When Illicit refused to acknowledge his father's question, nor look him directly in the eye, Elias continued.
Don't you think it's time for you to start helping out around here? You are my eldest son. The pack should look to you for strength, just as they do with Gallant. How will you take my place as Alpha one day if you keep behaving like this?
This again? Not interested. I don't see why I should help.
Because this is our pack. Our family.
Illicit scoffed, and Elias's expression turned stern once more.
When are you going to stop pretending like you don't care about this pack? If that were the case, then you wouldn't have—
Don't!
Illicit interrupted, snapping and turning his attention to his father.
Don't bring that up again. Is that why you want me as Alpha? Because of what I did for her?
You know I wouldn't base my judgment on that alone.
Yeah, well, you're wasting your time, as well as mine.
He rose on all fours, towering over his father, expression unwavering.
Now, I'll refrain from starting conflict with Gallant as long as he stays out of my way, just as you've asked. But it's time you start looking for leadership elsewhere. You won't find it in me. Now I'm done with this conversation.
He turned to leave, though just before reaching the mouth of the cave, Elias captured his attention with a surprisingly calm voice, one that he could not deny held both wisdom and certainty.
One day, you're going to learn, son, how much this pack means to you. I'm not the only one who puts faith in you.
And with this, Illicit was gone. Elias left to check on his beloved mate, believing that his children would somehow work out their grievances, despite what history had dictated for them. Illicit did not wish to think upon the matter any further, choosing instead to ignore his circumstances. He walked just long enough to arrive at a soft shaded patch of grass, away from one of the beaten paths. He had often found himself here when he needed to get away from the confines of the den. With a hard plop, he landed on his side, legs sprawled out, to the utmost comfort. Lovelorn had said it herself, that once the meeting was over, he could return to his sleep, and so he decided on doing just that. It hadn't taken long, however, for his companion to join him. Her light footsteps well known to his ear, she had likely followed his scent, realizing all too quickly that he had left the area. He did not acknowledge her presence, nor did he bother to turn his attention towards her. Rather, he remained in position, his eyes shut, even after the warmth of her frame could be felt at his back. Gallant, however, had taken his father's words with more sensitivity than he would have liked to admit. He could not face his brother, unable to suddenly push his feelings aside and call a truce. He left with heavy steps, trotting down through the beaten path of their territory. He had no destination in mind, wishing only to shake the nagging thoughts that threatened to consume him. He didn't even notice a second set of paws that followed just behind, his attention now completely occupied. This was enough to regain his focus, and he turned to see Halaki now matching his pace beside him.
What is it?
His voice was a bit rougher than expected, and even he had wished he could demonstrate more restraint.
I'm just checking on you. That was quite the scene this morning.
Gallant sighed, clearly ashamed of the sudden outburst he had put on public display, though it was clear that the anger still resided.
It was certainly a heinous act on both our parts. I apologize for causing such a spectacle.
Oh, you say that, though deep down you're still blaming him, aren't you?
Gallant turned to give her a sharp look that threatened her remark.
When are you gonna drop the act, Gallant? If you want to get mad, then get mad. It's just me around anyway.
Stop yanking my chain. You know as well as I do that it isn't appropriate to behave in such a way.
Halaki could not help but sigh at his response, shaking her head in a disapproving manner.
You don't have to try to be so perfect all the time. No one expects it.
It's for that exact reason I have to be. No one expects enough from me. Not you, not the pack, not even Father.
Gallant.
They stopped just before a large body of water, the one which had marked one end of their territory's border. It swayed in gentle, calm motions, much unlike the unsteady swaying of Gallant's own heart. He dipped his head to look at his reflection below, the cool of the water's touch no longer providing solace.
I've done everything in my power to change his mind. And Illicit.
The spark of anger had returned, though only for a moment, as the despair and desperation once again took hold.
He does whatever he pleases and gets away with it. How can Father still believe him to be the next leader? He doesn't even want it.
Quickly realizing he had spoken so abruptly, and of something so sensitive, he quickly straightened up, once again trying to remove any physical trace of his anger.
Sorry. And after I just said this behavior was unacceptable.
Quit apologizing already. It's not like I think any less of you.
Haliki sat back on her hindquarters, her tail wrapping gingerly around her tinted paws.
I know that it isn't easy. I, myself, don't understand Alpha's decisions. But for as long as I've been a part of this pack, I've never seen him do anything to make me question his judgment. Even if it seems absurd, I trust him.
How can I rely on his decision when he chooses someone so irresponsible to lead our pack? Doesn't it bother you? If he's made to be Alpha, what would become of us?
I know you and your brother don't get along, but he isn't a terrible guy. Sure, he may be irresponsible, and even a bit harsh at times, but I have never felt that he harbored anything other than good intentions for our pack.
Has your judgment also lapsed, Haloke? I thought of all the wolves you would understand where I come from most.
I believe in you, Gallant, but I also believe in the Alpha. You should too.
He was left with nothing more to express, though he knew that he should trust the word of his father, the word of his Alpha. There was an overwhelming doubt that clouded his judgment. He could not accept the fact that Illicit had been chosen over him. And more so than this, he could not believe that Illicit did not want the position.
I'd like to be alone for a while.
Haliki seemed a bit disappointed at his response, though she willingly complied. Gallant had laid himself upon the shoreline, the water caressing his underside. He tried to enjoy the cooling sensation easing his tense muscles with each light crash upon his pelt. And just as the waves began to cool his torso, he attempted to let the same sensation ease his mind.